All right, so today's video, this is actually a really cool idea from somebody that left a comment on one of my most recent videos. I can't remember who it was. I can't find the comment anymore, but if it was you, leave a comment and I'll probably give you a pin. I hope you're watching this one. So what this video is going to be is advice that I would give to my younger self as a lifter. And this isn't going to be me just tearing apart my younger self and saying I'm dumb for doing this method or I had the wrong mindset or something like that. This is going to be, what could I have done better? Like, what could I have done on top of what I was already doing, or what's something I could have tweaked? I'm not here just to tear apart my younger self because I don't think that does a whole ton of good. So what I want to go through today is what would I have done better and what would I have been more, I guess, particular with when I was a younger lifter. So some of this applies to when I was a beginner. Some of this applies to when I was an intermediate and anywhere else in between. So I have five or six things on here that I do want to go through that I think will help you guys a little bit. So I tried to find a happy medium between what would I tell my personal younger self specifically that could also benefit people watching this video. This isn't something that's going to be hyper specific to myself that wouldn't benefit you guys, but this isn't going to be like generic, vague answers like you'll hear on maybe some other channels. So this is going to be kind of that happy medium to where, yes, this is what I would do to help myself as a younger lifter, but it would also probably help a decent amount of you guys too, at least a couple of these things. So the first one, and this is going to be a big one, is I wish I recorded my progress better. So basically what I was doing as a beginner was like, I would film a lot of my stuff. I wish I did this in like my first 4 months of lifting because that's when I made some really good newbie gains. And I was fortunate enough to be in a position to make good newbie gains, but I didn't really take many pictures back then. It really started after that 4-month mark when I already had some gains. I wish I had some more before pictures and stuff when I was first starting out. I did film a lot after that. I have a ton of old videos that I can go back and look at, and it's actually cool just to see like what I was doing and what my mindset was. So I do like to go back and see that stuff, but that's all besides the point. What I wish I did better was record my progress in multiple methods. And whether this would have helped me in the moment or not doesn't matter. It's best for reflecting on later. And this is something that you don't realize until it's later. So what I wish I had back then was maybe old training logs of like what my strength was. I think strength is something that in most people probably overemphasize in terms of a proxy for hypertrophy, and we don't emphasize the other methods that I'm about to mention quite enough, which would be progress photos in consistent lighting and angle so you can actually measure things objectively. And to get a little bit more objective, do measurements too, and body weight on top of that. So I wish I was doing this when I was first starting out, because this is something where you can say you kind of feel like you're making good gains, and you don't want to tell yourself you're not making good gains, but if you just kind of ignore that and you hope you're making good gains, then you'll maybe trick yourself into thinking you are. You'll notice that with a lot of people. They'll say like, oh, I tried this method and X muscle blew up and this blew up. I got so much bigger. But one thing you'll notice with people that make these claims is that there's never any numbers to back it up. Like one thing that I talk about a lot on the channel is when I built my arms basically over the past year or so, doing a little bit more of direct work. I brought them from 15.75 inches cold flexed to a little bit over 16.5 currently cold flexed at a slightly leaner body fat too. So that's a hard number. That's a hard number. So that's an assessment saying, okay, well, what I did, whether it's the change in volume or exercise selection or overall effort, that worked to grow my arms. If I just said, I feel like my arms are bigger, that's not an actual assessment. That's just a feeling. Having hard numbers to base these things off of is going to be key, because a lot of our own bias and us saying, well, that would be a waste of time if I didn't make progress in the past 15 months on building my arms, so I'm just going to pretend like I used to be really small and I made a bunch of progress. That's probably not the way to do it. So get the factual assessments. I know it's not fun to record these things, but your future self will thank you, and you will get better assessments to help your training moving forwards. That's super important. I definitely wish I recorded my progress a little bit more in terms of those methods. Number 2 is going to be, I wish I focused more on main gaining. Number 2 is going to be, I wish I set hypertrophy goals. And this actually feeds off of my first point. And this is primarily going to be the same method. So body weight and measurements, and obviously progress pictures too, but that's hard to set an objective goal over. So I wish I said, like, all right, I'm a beginner, my arms are 13.5 inches, and I want to get to 15-inch arms. I think having a goal like that really motivates you, especially with measurements and body weight, because it's like, it's an objective number that you can kind of chase and make assessments when you're on the path there. Can you get carried away with this and go down the wrong path and just gain a bunch of fat and do a dirty bulk to hit 200 pounds, or bulk up to 28% body fat just to have 15 or 16-inch arms? For sure, that's definitely a thing. But having goals like that is super important, because I think having that hard number, it gives you a little bit more motivation. Like, you have an end goal in sight rather than just kind of an arbitrary, like, I'd like to look this certain way. And that's not a bad thing to have, but having some hard numbers and such an abstract thing that we're trying to achieve in hypertrophy training can make your training a lot better and give you a little bit more motivation too. Number 3, and this is probably my personal biggest regret, because it's so unlike me to do this, because I've always had, I guess, a very strong sense of self, and I've always trusted my gut instincts with things, but I broke away from this with my training. And basically, number 3, this point is going to be, I wish I went with my gut on what works and what doesn't. When I was consuming fitness influencers primarily rather than informational sources, I found myself eventually just training how the influencer trained because everyone else was doing it, and obviously because I was being influenced by that person by consuming all of their content. And I'll touch more on that in a second, but I do want to finish this off. Even if it went against my initial instinct, I would do this. I wish I had spent more time experimenting with training on my own, not only for the sake of finding what works best, but just to enjoy it more. And one thing you'll notice in my channel is I always wear flannels. I cover up my physique purposely on the channel because I don't want you guys to be influenced that much by me. Will I post a physique update like once every few months, or post a training video once every month or two? For sure, because I think that provides you guys value. But I don't want you to chase exactly what I do and exactly what I look like, because I saw what that did to me and I was being overly influenced. So one thing you'll realize with this channel is I never give you guys like a hard number or specific lifts to do. I want to teach you guys how to think about lifting, and my channel is about mindset, if you can't tell. So I wish I went with my gut, and this is my biggest regret, because I'd say I would, like, when I was consuming all these influencers content, I was 17, 18, 19, even up till when I was like 20 or 21. And then I kind of woke up when I was 20 or 21. But what happens is I had this strong sense of self, and I had this exact vision of how I like to train, and I had this instinctual feeling of what worked for me. And obviously it did work. I made great gains when I was a beginner. And eventually when I started to say, all right, well, I'm only at the gym for an hour and a half a day. I don't want to leave the gym, but I still want to be involved with fitness stuff. So I'd obviously go on YouTube, watch some influencers videos, and just watch other people lift, because when you're 18 and have free time to do that, it's just what you do. So what I would eventually do is say, all right, well, I'm going to keep following this person, watch some of their old videos, and just go back. And obviously these are just training vlogs. I'm not actually learning anything, but what happens is you slowly become influenced, and you're just bombarded with watching this person lift a certain way and have a specific mindset that it starts to override how you like to lift. You start to say, all right, well, I want to chase that exact physique. I want to do this exact program that this person's doing. And I experienced this pretty significantly, and I lost my sense of self. And I feel like that's been my strong suit that I've kind of had my whole life. And I've always like kind of known who I was, and I'm always cool to be on my own and do my own thing. I've never needed to like follow somebody else. But once I did start following other people that didn't provide anything back to me, I got off track, and I started to kind of lose that passionate excitement that I had for training, because it wasn't the methods that I like to use. So essentially how this channel came about was me saying, all right, well, this kind of burned me out of training, and I lost that initial like love and passion that I had for it. So how can I steer people out of going down that path and provide you with the right mindset and be like an influencer without you wanting to become me? And that's something that I know I didn't word that perfectly, but that's what's constantly going through my head with this channel. I'm like, all right, well, I'm going to cover my physique. I'll show it to you on occasion, but I don't want you to constantly consume what I do for training exactly, and I don't want you to consume my physique exactly, because you're just going to want to start chasing what I have. And that's not, I don't want to put you guys down that path. So I do have you guys in mind with that, and I'm trying to make a little bit of a change here. And there's nothing wrong with people that show their physique and show their training, but you just have to understand that if you're constantly consuming someone else's content, like don't get overly influenced. Like, still stick to your gut instinct. And it's a very abstract concept, but I think you guys can probably understand that one. Number 4 is going to be, yeah, kind of the same thing. I actually combined 3 and 4. So 4 is going to be, yeah, spend less time following influencers and PED users. So I can kind of touch on the PED users a little bit here. So being natural was, it's something, like, everybody says, like, oh, I'm natural, but I considered steroids when I was younger. Like, I think the biggest thing with me was I got into natural bodybuilding because of the health benefits. Like, I'm not going to sit here and say I didn't want to get big. Of course I wanted to get big, and that's my biggest priority, but not at the expense of health. And I think steroids being something that is just simply not worth it. And it's so temporary for the results, and it's so permanent for the side effects. That is something that I just never considered. And eventually, like, if you're just following these influencers, you start to realize, like, all these guys are on PEDs. And I'll probably have more videos about this in the future, but I wish I never followed these guys, because it almost, like, normalizes these extreme physiques that you just probably don't want or need until you keep consuming them and they become normal. Like, I got to a point where you see, like, an IFBB pro, you see, like, a pro bodybuilder, and at first you're like, okay, this guy's a freak, he doesn't even look human. And then as the months and the years go by, eventually you can say, all right, that person does look pretty human, he looks pretty normal. And you get to this weird place where it's like, now bodybuilders look like normal people, and normal people just look like small people. And that's probably the simplest way I can put it without trying to confuse you guys. But I guess I wish I didn't, like, go down that path where I was following all those drug users. And I don't even know why I was. Like, obviously when I was younger, I didn't think they were taking anything. Obviously I knew IFBB pros were, but other than that, like, your typical kind of like shredded Gymshark type influencer. But you just get to a point where it's like, why are you following that person if they're it's apples and oranges? Like, it just doesn't make a whole ton of sense to follow those people. I'm very glad that I unfollowed all of them. And I'm fortunate enough, and this is probably the one kind of unique thing about me, is that I've never had body dysmorphia, and I've never really experienced that. So I'm very lucky. But even as someone that has never had that, just seeing and kind of like getting those PED user physiques normalized, like, it even kind of changed my perception too. And I could only imagine, like, the amount of people that do struggle with things like body dysmorphia, if you're constantly being bombarded with that, like, I couldn't even imagine how much that messes with your head. So that's not something that I can relate to a whole ton, but I can kind of start to, I guess, understand a little bit of how bad that could eventually become. And I don't want anybody to look up to those guys when it's just apples and oranges. Like, follow natural bodybuilders, pick someone that has a similar build to you, and maybe strive to chase after something like that. Like, I think a lot of the silver era bodybuilders, like, yeah, are they all achievable? Probably not, but that's a super realistic goal to at least get close to for a lot of people. So that's my point there. Number 5, and this is something that I didn't realize until very, very, very recently. So I've always been someone to consume a decent amount of, like, YouTube fitness and that kind of stuff, but one thing I've never done is actually interact with people in the comments. I never commented on videos. I barely went into the comment section. And now that I have a channel, I'm like, damn, like, that guy with, like, that random profile picture and name that doesn't even make sense is, like, a genuinely intelligent, advanced lifter. Like, how... I never would have assumed that. So after seeing the comments on these videos, I'm like, holy shit, you guys actually know what you're talking about, and you have advice that you can give to other people in the comments. One of the best places to interact with people is going to be in the YouTube comment section, where everybody's going out of their way to help people purely for the sake of helping people. And I think with the chance of a creator seeing that comment and responding to it, that's like it's almost like free coaching. And then you have an entire community of like-minded people to give you advice and kind of like bounce ideas off of each other. I wish I interacted a little bit more with the community, and with something that is so, I guess, niche and rare to see in like your real life community, having something like YouTube to interact with like-minded people is actually super useful. It's like you can go to a bunch of gyms, especially like where I live. There's not a whole ton of people that do exactly what I do that think similarly. So going to something like a platform like my channel or another channel, something like that, is a great way to bounce ideas off of other people. Number 6, the last one, I wish I enjoyed my training more. And this is something that doesn't even necessarily just go to me. I think this goes to everybody. There's a truth to just about every method of bodybuilding. And are some methods more optimal than others? 100%. At the end of the day, if there's a method that's like suboptimal, but you truly enjoy it, that's probably the best method for you. And even if it isn't, like, let's say you did get slightly worse results, but you actually enjoyed your training in the meantime, I think that might be the way to go. So that one's a quick one. I'm going to leave it at that. Let me know if you have any questions. I'll see you guys in probably 48 hours, maybe 96 hours. We'll see.